this chapter is going to go over the different values of money. First, we're going to discuss what the different values of money actually are and how it can have different values, how you can handle your money and how you can manage it, and I will show you ways on how you can plan out your spending, savings, and your investing. And we're going to learn about how money can actually grow without having to do anything. A few example problems we'll go over is saving for college and investing in money. There's a few different types of ways to gain money without actually doing anything. The first and most simple way is to open a checking and savings account, because the banks will give you an account with an interest rate on it. This helps to give yourself back some more money. It might not be a lot, but you're getting a return from the banks. The reason they operate this way is because banks, they're able to give out loans to their members because they have all this money going through the system, and so the banks are technically borrowing your money. So as like a thank you, they give you a little interest on the money you have put into the bank. There are two different types of interest that you may encounter in accounts, and it's either going to be compounding interest or simple interest. Simple interest is not as common, but it's the easiest to understand, whereas when you have when you put some money in a bank or you invest it in some stock or whatever, your return is going to be, the interest rate is going to go off of your original amount that you deposited. But the difference is with compounding interest, which is more common, it's going to continue compounding on all the interest that has been added back into your account. So it grows at a much faster rate compared to simple interest. Saying money has different values can be very confusing. The best way to go about it is just to think about inflation. The most common example everyone hears about is how the price of bread was so cheap 50 years ago and whatnot, and people often can compare inflation rates. They do use bread and eggs and gas, most common, to be able to reflect on the different inflation rates. So, for example, maybe you paid about $1 for bread 20 years ago, and now bread is like $4. That just shows how money had a different value back then than it does now. And yeah, so it's the different time values. So any money you made back in the day, that's going to be a different value than today. If you bought a car 20 years ago, it was probably a quarter of the price of what you would pay today, but also salaries are higher and the cost of living is higher, and this is how money has different values. And this chapter goes into detail of how you get to solve for these different values. So if there's any point in time where you wanted to figure out how much your $100 that you have today would have really been worth 20 years ago, you can do that with the following equation. So this equation, it has 5 different components to it: future value, present value, interest rate, compounding periods, and time. This equation can be very helpful in many different situations, and you can solve for any of the 5 components as long as you have the rest of the 4. So you might not necessarily want to solve for future value, but you can also solve for present value, whichever one you want. The compounding periods is perhaps the most difficult to understand, because what it is when you're getting interest on an account, it can the banks will either compound it. They can do it once a year. They can do it semi-annually, which is twice. They can do it quarterly, 4 times, or they can consistently be compounding and do it throughout the entire year constantly. So it's important to be able to know what your different periods are going to be because it makes a big difference. So problem number 1 is a really great relatable example because it's going to be very useful in the future if you plan on saving money for your child to be able to go to college. So the first step anytime solving one of these problems would be just to record your equation because it helps give you something to follow along. In this problem, we are planning on saving $100,000 and the bank is offering us an interest rate of 8% compounded semi-annually, which is twice, and we want to be able to deposit this $100,000 in 18 years. So what we are solving for is our present value because we do not know how much we need to deposit in order to end up with $100,000. The first step would be just to fill in your equation. So 100,000 is our future value, I is 8%, T is 18, and N is 2. And then the next step would be just to solve it a little further. So $100,000 equals present value times what we're going to end up getting is 4.103, which is multiplying our interest rate, our compounding periods, and our time. So when you divide that out and further solve it, we come to the conclusion that we need to deposit $24,372.41 into the bank today in order to come out with $100,000 in the future. So in our next example problem, we are deciding between Banker 1 and Banker 2 where to put our $1,000 investment. Both banks are offering us different interest rates and different compounding periods, and we want to make sure that in 5 years when we withdraw the money, we get our most return. Banker number 1 is offering us a 3% interest rate that is compounded semi-annually, which is twice. And banker number 2 is offering us a 2.5% interest rate compounded quarterly, which is 4 times. So what we'll be solving for is our future value. After plugging in the information we have and further solving the equations, we finally come to the conclusion that with banker number 1, we are going to end up with a future value of $1,160, so we gained $160 in interest. And with banker number 2, our future value will be $1,133 with a gain of $133. So our best option is to go with banker number 1, who had the 3% interest rate compounded semi-annually.